Hi everyone, I'm Ellie Wong and I'm an artist living and working in London, and I co-run a space called Samay Gallery in Brixton. Today, on behalf of It's Freezy in LA, I'm going to be interviewing artist Alexandra Daisy Ginsberg ahead of her 2021 Eden Project commission.
Hi, it's really good to be with you, and I'm sorry we're not together in one place, but I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I'm really excited to hear a bit more about your Pollinator Project, which is happening at the Eden Project. So maybe you could give us a bit of an introduction into that.
Of course, so I am working on, in a way, what feels like the perfect pandemic project, because I get to think about flowers and pollinators while we're locked inside. And the commission is for a large outdoor installation at the Eden Project, which will be opening late spring or early summer this year. And it's part of a bigger program called Creator Buzz, which is about pollinators, which will be launching at Eden, funded by the Garfield Weston Foundation. And I was asked to make a proposal to make something about pollinators. And I said, well, can I make something for pollinators instead? So I'm designing an algorithm that will create a garden that is optimized for pollinators and not for human aesthetics. So that's kind of the big ambition. And we have a site that's about 30 by 45 meters outdoors on the kind of slopes of the Eden Project. And this garden hopefully will look unlike any other garden, because it will be planted in a way that is not normal. So we are creating a system. I'm working with an amazing team, including a computer scientist in Poland called Przemek Wityczik. And we're designing an algorithm that maximizes the blooming across different seasons, that maximizes for the most diverse range of pollinators. And ultimately, we're describing this as an algorithm that maximizes empathy. So what does it mean to plant and build a garden that isn't for humans is also a really kind of complicated question, because as soon as humans are involved, we start making choices. And it's been really fascinating working with the horticulturalists at Eden on this, and also other pollinator experts like Dave Goulson and Lars Chitka, who are experts in a diverse range of pollinators. So we're also incorporating, for example, the way that bees memorize the locations of flowers. So a bee will visit about 10,000 flowers in a day. And if you have ever tried to optimize your route, you'd know that shaving a few seconds off if you've got to make 10,000 stops really matters. They actually memorize the locations of different flowers. So we're also building in patterning into the algorithm that helps them to find like a supermarket sweep of the plants. And then each of the plants that we're choosing is a curated database of plants that is specific for the UK conditions that Eden has. And each plant has been chosen because it's really good for pollinators, because a lot of the flowers that we plant in our gardens, if we have a garden, may actually have been bred for the way we like them to look or smell, and might not actually have as much pollen or nectar as they would naturally. So the plan then is working with Google Arts and Culture and the Gaia Art Foundation, who are also supporting us, to put the algorithm online, which means that anyone will be able to play with this algorithm and create their own artwork, which they can then go on to plant. And then the plan is to start expanding this internationally and start creating more gardens internationally, and use that as a mechanism to build new databases so that people outside the UK can start to plant with locally appropriate plants as well. And everyone can plant their own edition of the artwork if they can find a space to do it, and really create an artwork that is for pollinators and not for humans. So that's the experiment I've got myself into for the last year and a half, it feels like.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to see pictures of the Eden Project one, but to kind of get going with, I've only got a few window boxes outside my windows, but I'm sure I can kind of adapt.
So this is, I mean, this is the challenge, is obviously and I think we've all become more brutally aware of the limited access we have to nature and natural spaces through the pandemic and lockdowns in different cities especially. And there was, when I was coming up with this project this time last year, I was very aware of how I wanted to buy seeds. This was March, just as lockdown hit in the UK, and suddenly all the garden centres were closed. And I had a desperate urge to plant things in some tubs, and I couldn't, because I couldn't buy seeds. And this idea that seeds can travel and data can travel and pollinators can travel, but we can't, then comes up against the reality of the luxury that has become access to natural spaces and gardens and places to actually plant. So we hope that people visiting the website, you can actually create a virtual garden. So we're working with the workers in Studio Frith to create a really beautiful experience where you can see this garden digitally and explore a painted garden, basically. And then it's the next stage is, have you got somewhere to plant it, or can you find somewhere? And in that way, we also, I'm hoping that this is also a mechanism for a form of creative activism. So is there an allotment nearby, which part of it could be dedicated to creating a pollinator garden, or a community space, or a roundabout, or some other space where this actually gives you a design that is an artwork, so it has some kind of value attached to it, is what I'm interested in as part of this experiment. It's like, what does it mean if it's not just sort of a piece of nature that's being put there, but it has this, so using the commodity value of art in a way to actually kind of drive planting these Trojan horse gardens.
Yeah. Now, kind of like along that same line, I was wondering, so obviously, like you said, this artwork is for the pollinators rather than for the people seeing it. And do you think kind of in general, a lot of artworks that are made nowadays are too human-centric, too kind of reliant on what scientists or artists or general public are gonna think about it and their reactions?
That's a really, I mean, it's a really interesting question. I've been making works about our relationship with nature purposefully from a very human-centric point of view, because I'm trying to create a sense of empathy or to create a sense of loss. So some of the works I made in the last couple of years, like The Substitute, which is a rhino, a northern white rhino brought back to life digitally. It's a life-size projection, and he's sort of coming to life and then disappearing in front of your eyes. And it's, you know, the moment where you have the animal perspective is that you are getting stared at by this animal looking at you in the gallery, but it's not for rhinos, it's for humans to create a sense of connection. And I really felt, you know, starting to, you know, last year when I was asked to kind of propose something for this competition, I was really struck by how often I was being asked, like, what is the role of arts in the ecological crisis? And I have a design background, an architecture background, and so I'm always sort of kind of coming up against this sort of problem-solving approach that I was, you know, that comes quite naturally because of my training. It's like, well, let's solve this problem, and obviously this is not a problem that I think that we can solve. I think it's our kind of the complete crisis that we have created as humanity as a whole towards the natural world. And obviously some groups of humans are far worse and far more guilty than others, means that like an artwork, I mean, what is an artwork supposed to do? It's not, is it there to tell a story? You start to get into these kind of big questions, like what is it for? But I really wanted to experiment with some of the things that really inspired me at the Eden Project around their goals of sort of connecting with the audience, creating a sense of awe at the natural world, sense of jeopardy as well, but also enabling hope and agency. And those sort of two key words really got me. I was like, well, what can we do that actually, it's not creating a solution, like one pollinator garden isn't going to solve anything, but it's about creating a sense that even an artwork can not just inspire people or create a sense of empathy or loss, but actually help them to feel that they can do things and become more aware. So in a way, there's a kind of design campaign embedded inside it as well. But it's for me, it's an experiment. It's something very different to what I've done before.
No, that's interesting, because thinking about the kind of longevity of the piece, longevity of plants in general, I've had kind of seed distribution or seed, what's it called? The kind of prolonging of a seed's life. So something that you planted 100 years ago could be planted now. It's kind of interesting because within like the art and design world, it feels like there's so much kind of temporary, fleeting exhibition space or art fairs and design fairs where, you know, a huge structure is built within a park, all of timber and plastic and stuff, and then within a week it's taken down and kind of disposed of. It's kind of mad to think one of the paintings within that space might last hundreds and hundreds of years, but the tree that was grown to make the timber for the kind of actual art fair structure, it's kind of, its life's been cut short. So
it's something that I have been really struggling with. So I mean, my kind of route into all of this has been through an unusual trajectory. I spent about 10 years working with genetic engineers and synthetic biologists, so people who were working in laboratories to actually engineer living matter. And I was working in that field and so embedded in the field and learning about the politics of how science and technology is made, how new fields are kind of built and visions enacted. And after I went back to do a PhD at the Royal College of Art, and then I decided I wanted to start making bigger installations about, and more broadly about our relationship with nature and technology, and our kind of disconnect with the nature that we're part of. And then I found myself in this crazy position where I'm flying around the world talking about extinction, about biodiversity loss, building, one of the works, a collaboration that I've done in the last couple of years called Resurrecting the Sublime, which is about bringing back the smell of extinct flowers, working with a biotech company in Boston called Ginkgo Bioworks, and the smell artist and researcher Cecil Tolas. And our largest installations, there's one was at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and will be coming to Venice this year to the Architecture Biennale, involves shipping tons of rocks because we recreate this lost landscape, and the rocks become a place to sit on as you smell these lost flowers around you. And it's an incredibly powerful storytelling kind of moment, and enables people to connect with this lost place. But it involves shipping tons of material, and it's a really complicated thing to grapple with, especially because of my interest in sustainability and creating sort of awareness and also change. So this project really fascinated me, the idea of the seed as well, because it's the things that are traveling are ephemeral. Obviously, data and the algorithm itself are using energy to kind of create the solution for each garden scheme. But the fact that you don't have to ship the artwork beyond ordering the plants, and then it could last 5 years or longer, and it self-sustains in its own way. So that to me is just super exciting, that digital artwork could be printed in flowers and not on a screen in a gallery, talking about nature. And it's not to say that those things are wrong, and I'm going to continue to exhibit those works, but it's for me a really exciting direction to realize that I could actually make a digital artwork that doesn't require a screen being plugged in the gallery. And what does that look like, and how does it work? So it's part of the kind of the research aspect of this as well.
I was wondering, because you mentioned kind of traveling to places to give talks and presentations and things, and obviously we're doing an interview now, but aside from the kind of physical works that you're making, how kind of integral are those talks and presentations and interviews to the actual artwork? Are they, do you sort of count them as an artwork in themselves, or are they more of an explanation of your research?
That's a really, really good question, I think, because for me, it's really part of my practice. And I mean, it's something I wrote a lot about. And I think because of the journey I took, sort of spending so much time being the odd one out in a field of science, where I used to spend a lot of time presenting at science conferences and technology conferences and talking from the perspective of an artist or designer to an audience of 1,000 synthetic biologists or policymakers, and it became a form of performance art for me. And it's something I wrote about and explored in my PhD, because it was a form of troublemaking as well. And so getting up on stage and talking about my work is not something I ever imagined I would do. It's like my idea of hell until I had to, it's like, okay, this is reality. But it became a really powerful mechanism for storytelling, and I'm very interested in that ability to kind of connect, especially with audiences that I'm not familiar with. So I'm probably more comfortable on talking about my work to a scientific audience than to an art audience. I don't come from a traditional art background. So in a way, I'm also other to that world. But the jeopardy, the troublemaking, the ability to sort of use the work as a form of diplomacy to also change minds or open up new pathways became really important to my practice. And there were occasions where I ended up in like shouting matches with scientists, or in other occasions just sort of gently delivering a message or finding a way to deliver a message that actually became a talking point. And so bringing in things I was interested in, sort of around kind of ethics and who has the right to design natural things, and creating a critical space within a field of science, and the mechanism, journals, conferences, like using those tools of the trade of science as a place to perform art became a really interesting kind of thing for me. But yeah, walk into a conference of like 5,000 scientists is also kind of amazing field work, and a place of generated a lot for my work as well. So I kind of, in a way, I miss conferences, but I'm also really happy not to be traveling so much at the moment.
This is like quite a specific response to this, but so I know so you're saying in cities it's quite difficult to come across nature and big kind of vast expanses, and I was just thinking, aside from gardens and parks where we come across these sort of natural things, and immediately I was kind of thinking water, and you're probably not going to be near like a huge lake or a big sea or anything, but I was thinking we could come across water every day just within our homes, in our flats and stuff. And people like Thames Water that provide this water to us, I think they do have these kind of water saving mechanisms and technologies, like kind of shower hoses you can fit or things you attach to your tap. But I feel like so much of the information around like what is available is sort of, it feels quite hidden and kind of like it's not shared so much. And I was wondering whether, in the same way that you give these talks to kind of different audiences of people that might, so maybe the scientists are not engaged within the art world at all, but you're kind of sharing that information with them from your perspective, whether more could be done sort of on just like a really basic level of how, for example, we could all save water within our flats, or change our relationship with like the thing that's just coming out of our tap, which is actually not an endless resource, in the same way that your kind of garden project is maybe trying to change people's ideas towards like their relationship with nature.
I think that's what's so powerful. I mean, I've used the kind of expression storytelling a lot, and in the pieces that I make, they're often based on this kind of iceberg of research. And for me, so much of what I love about what I do is getting to learn, and having the opportunity to go and ask experts things and seeing if they'll reply to me, and kind of starting to piece together these stories. And I think what's also really important coming in as an outsider to these fields of practice, fields of expertise, is that my questions are super naive. I hadn't researched pollinators before. The previous projects, one was about plants on Mars, another one about northern white rhinos, another one about 3 very obscure extinct flowers, each made extinct by colonial action. So each of those kind of is a huge research project. What I'm trying to do is to find a way to connect people just through an emotional kind of response first, and then you can dig deeper and find out more. And I mean, one of the first projects I made was a collaboration with a designer called James King. We made a briefcase full of coloured poo and took it to a genetic engineering competition where there's 5,000 young genetic engineers at MIT. And we walked around with this briefcase of coloured poo, talking about some work we'd done with some students at Cambridge. This is in 2009. And they were designing bacteria that produce different colour pigments so that you could potentially sort of make water sensors, like detect whether water was contaminated with arsenic using engineered bacteria. And we imagined the future, well, maybe we'll be drinking this stuff in probiotic drinks and you'll be pooping different colors. But the briefcase became the way to have these conversations and actually to talk about the workshops we'd done with the students, which were about ethics, which was about their responsibility of creating engineered organisms, but through this incredibly visceral sort of shock tactic of opening up a briefcase that's full of 6 colored shit and taking it to a place you'd never normally expect to see that. And we were actually asking questions about what is the interface for biological engineering. It's, everything was like graphics of DNA and like microbes looking like computers. And instead we were saying, well, could a computer interface be your shit? And it's through those kinds of things that, because we're all human and we all poop, we kind of connect. So in the same way with water, finding, I'm not doing public campaigns or information campaigns, and I'm not doing public engagement for science. That's like a whole other thing, a whole other conversation. But they become mechanisms to actually connect with people and to. So I love that part of the work as well. It's like, how do you refine a story to the kind of smallest point that can help people kind of connect emotionally, and then they can kind of open up and understand more. So with the pollinator garden, what we're doing is really complicated, creating an algorithmic garden, and I've been testing it at the garden where I volunteer and asking the volunteers who are much older than me, often retired, and it's sort of like the algorithm, but then it's actually a way to discuss algorithms, and it's a way to discuss and start discussing like, how do we make the choices that we're making in the garden, what we're planting, who it's for, and how do we think about this differently. So it's like a way in to start having these conversations. But I don't know how to solve the water crisis. Next project.
Yeah, it's like the next commission.
Yeah.
Well, I think we might have come to the end of our time, but I think that's quite a good place to leave it in suspense before we get to see how the Eden Project commission turns out. So I guess, is there somewhere that people will be able to find that? It will be on the Eden Project website?
It'll be on the Eden, it will have its own domain. We haven't announced the domain name yet, but there will be, there's information on the Eden website, and it'll be coming in the next few months. And I really hope that everyone watching will play with it and maybe find a space where you can plant a pollinator artwork that is not for you to enjoy, but just for the pollinators to enjoy. But maybe it's beautiful as well for us.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, it's been really nice talking to you today, and I hope you have a good rest of your week.
You too. Really, really nice to talk. And keep up. Yeah, if you can solve the water crisis, I'm happy to join in.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.